Heart Talks on the way up, looking upon the heart. It's the name of my book and the show. I like to call it Heart Talk because it's about the heart. And we're going to continue with our study of heart morphology, the instantaneous, spontaneous, and continuous change that we're all capable of, or not. We're going to start our study of the character states and personality styles, starting with the broken heart disposition. This is where, well, the effects of our being hurt in our life, being neglected in any way, comes into play. The harm that's done to the human psyche is tremendous. As a therapist, I see it every day. I never believed it when I read it in a book, but I can see that everything that is hurtful for people in the here and now, in current situations, the reason that it's so magnified and so intense and difficult is because it's not the first time that that sort of thing has happened, or that same feeling of betrayal, abandonment, rejection, harm done, fear, guilt, all sorts of things. The broken heart disposition. We're all capable of becoming these characters that I'm going to present. Here we have Fragile Freda, or if you're a male, Fragile Frodo. And this character state and personality style of Fragile Freda and Frodo has little faith. She does not trust in God like she needs to, and therefore feels no peace. Fragile Freda is very sensitive and emotionally delicate. She very likely is depressed and or anxious. Anxiety and depression tend to go together. There's probably excessive negative reactivity to minor troublesome events. When you morph in to this character state of the broken heart disposition, you might be easily hurt by the ambiguous words and actions of others. Even though you don't know, you may interpret them to mean the worst possible thing. She thinks that she has been victimized, like probably she has earlier in her life for real. In the current situation, she feels injured in every real and imagined abandonment possible, rejection, rudeness, insensitivity. She feels it. She doesn't know it, but she is making a whole slew of thinking errors. You need to correct thinking errors that occur when you look upon the heart. One of the very first cognitive distortions, cognitions are our thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, basically our thoughts. And we have certain automatic thoughts that run into our head, but they may or may not be correct, much like a child would run into a toy store. Discipline, no, hey, you come back. And we need to examine to see if we're distorting reality, distortions of the cognitions. One thinking error is called magnification. This is thinking the event that we experience is catastrophic and make a great big problem of it, when it is not really. It's how we think about it. The Fragile Freda, she makes a big deal out of nothing. Another common thinking area is when we make the error of distorting what should or should not take place. It's called shoulding. Shoulding is something that Fragile Freda does a whole lot in her distorted thinking about what she or others should or should not have done, or should have done differently. She thinks she should be better than she is, and if she thinks that way, she falls into despair, calling herself a failure anytime someone comments about her situation. She especially feels pressured by others' demands and them shooting on her. We know exactly what has to happen, but we need to, instead of saying should, we need to say it would be nice if. Another thinking error that Fragile Freda and Frodo make are personalization, taking things much too personally, sort of concluding that outside events are occurring because of her or reflecting negatively on her. She is crushed every time she hears the slightest innuendo of criticism or loud voices or disapproval. If somebody laughs, she personalized it and said, they must be laughing at me. Is by setting firm boundaries where sometimes you have to choose not to care too much about what other people say, what other people think, and what other people do. Although we love them and accept them for who they are, we cannot personalize OPP, other people's problems. It has to do with jumping to conclusions where she reads people's minds, believes she knows what negative things people are intending or what they're thinking about her. Also, she predicts the future. She jumps to conclusions about the future, usually dreading what terrible things are going to happen next. More thinking errors that make Freda fragile. Well, overgeneralization. That's where there's a belief that because it happened before in such and such a situation with such and such people at such and such a time, then it can be concluded that it'll happen again. Overgeneralization. One thing does not have to do with another. We're comparing apples and oranges, but people say, it's all fruit, it's all going to be the same. But we have to catch ourselves making that thinking error when in the Fragile Freda character state. Emotional reasoning is another error that when she feels a certain emotion, such as anxiety, and then she reasons to herself, because I feel afraid, there must be some danger which is about to befall me. But she is going by her emotions. And if her emotions are the only evidence that she has, that her conclusion is correct, she can easily be deceived. She may feel afraid because she hears a noise, but she looks outside and it's just a kitty cat on the leaves. So emotions can't be relied upon. The emotions are distorted because emotions come from being dead wrong and to have a broken heart. By thinking so negatively and distorting reality. So this list of these thinking errors are just a few of the thinking errors which represent basically a lack of faith. Hebrews chapter 11. Without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. The opposite of faith is fear, and Fragile Freda has a whole bunch of it. Origins of the Fragile Freda character state, well, damage has been done to her. On an unconscious level, at least, beneath her conscious level of understanding. It's like our consciousness is divided like an iceberg. The part of the iceberg that is above the water is the conscious mind, but the largest part of the iceberg underneath the water is the unconscious. The unconscious is where buried memories, emotionally damaging experiences are tucked away. And these in the unconscious mind tend to be uploaded from the memory into the frontal lobes of the brain where decisions are made. And so if we go by the past damage that has been done, if somebody, every time they yelled at us, they hit us, we might have the same fear when somebody yells at us now that we're going to be hit. That's called transference, where emotionally damaging experiences have caused us to be. She's then distracted by these events and the resulting thoughts they trigger. Therefore, she is distracted from her focus on and faith in God, which is ultimately the biggest problem. The most important benefit of being in the broken-hearted disposition is that because we feel the pain, it should remind us, I have to turn to you, God, where there's healing. He's the great physician. He comes for those that are sick, not for those that are well. And you have to be careful when you're in this personality style that things may become self-fulfilling prophecy, because Fragile Freda somehow unconsciously sets herself up so that what terrible thing she expects to happen does happen. If you think that people are not going to like you, you'll probably frown, and people will not be attracted to the person that's frowning. So Fragile Freda does self-defeating things, and self-fulfilling prophecy becomes true. There is a spiritual warfare, always, in all the dispositions that are broken. And the enemy, the spirit of deceit, has a field day with Freda. It's negative conclusions and fears. She keeps providing more and more vulnerabilities. And the liar, the enemy, he comes in and makes sure that she believes the lie. Basically, if you believe the lie, then you're controlled by the evil force of spirituality. If you believe the truth will set you free, because you're in the hands of the living God who loves you so much. On the spiritual level, negative predictions and interpretations are like having faith in the negative. So we must take captive every thought, examine it carefully to see that we are in the faith. You see, there's spiritual warfare and psychological conflict, both going on. In the spirit, spiritual warfare; in the psyche, which is the soul, psychological conflict. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says that we must be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, the schemes, to be able to withstand the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore. And Freda doesn't have any protective armor. She has a poor self-image, feelings of inferiority, like she's not good enough. Perhaps she's learned this from childhood. She feels unworthy, not good enough, unlovable, as fragile and helpless. That's what the uploadings from her mind are telling her. The strongholds and mindsets of the mind are believed when they get into the heart. The heart must be the discerner of truth and lies. That's why we must look upon the heart where Christ lives. Hopefully we've invited him into our hearts. Even though Fragile Freda may have been receptive to the Lord in her heart, she may be ignoring him at times. She's still saved, but she's in the fragile state because she's taken her mind off of him. She's taken her heart off of him. What Freda has is caring too much about what other people say, what other people think, and what other people do. This is the most common attitude problem needing to be corrected in Fragile Freda every day. And as I say in my premise, we should not judge people and put them in a diagnostic box as if they were just one personality or another. The morphology that I teach of the heart has to do with constant possibilities of change, immediately and spontaneously. Sometimes days. A major depressive disorder could be there. Another diagnosis, anxiety disorder. Dependent personality disorder, where there's a neediness, a codependency usually, with other people being her source of help rather than God. Also feelings of inferiority, which is a self-esteem issue. All of us need to feel better about ourselves because we have been justified by Christ. In and of ourselves, it's very difficult to feel good about ourselves. Sometimes we depend on the good relationship that we're in to feel proud, or the good job that we are employed in. And the lack of social skills is common, where Fragile Freda does not know how to communicate well her feelings and needs, her opinions, and to be assertive and set boundaries. So remember, by inviting Jesus into your heart and dwelling upon him in your heart and his word in your heart, you will be much more likely to morph out of Fragile Freda or Fragile Frodo.